Today, Sunday, the 17th of October, 2021. And you are all very welcome. Okay, so as we always do at the start of any program that is organized by the Hare Krishna movement, ISKCON, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, we always start by glorifying Lord Shri Krishna by chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. Okay, thank you very much. Hare Krishna, 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 Krishna.
Hare Krishna,
Śrīla Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Gauranitai, 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 Jaya Gauranitai, Jaya Gauranitai, 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 Jaya Gauranitai, Haribo, 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 Nitai Gaura, Haribo, Nitai Gaura, Haribo, 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 Nitai Gaura, Haribo. Jai Hare Krishna, Gaur Premanandi, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Om Ajana Timarandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshu Unmalitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Putale Swaya Dupa Gadamayam Dadati Swa Vedantikam. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So welcome again after the chanting. And I thought today, given the situation that we find ourselves, the world situation we find ourselves in, you know, whether it might be the COVID pandemic, the economic crisis, the what's the other one? The climate change, and many, many more things besides. I thought I would read from Śrimad-Bhagavatam, because obviously in situations, in any situation really, but certainly in difficult situations, the kind of world cries out for strong leaders, good leaders, not just strong by the way, but good leaders like that. So I thought I'd read from Śrimad-Bhagavatam, brief excerpt, the first canto, chapter 16. The title of the chapter is How Parīkṣit Received the Age of Kali. And this is text number 1. And I'll just read the English translation. Sutta Goswami said, O learned Brahmins, Mahārāja Parīkṣit then began to rule over the world as a great devotee of the Lord under the instructions of the best of the twice-born Brahmanas. He ruled by those great qualities which were foretold by expert astrologers at the time of his birth. And the purport, or the kind of unpacking of that what I just read by Srila Prabhupada, to put context into it. And I'm going to skip the first part actually, and just start from kind of the second paragraph really. So Prabhupada says, Mahārāja Parīkṣit was therefore a devotee of the first order, and thus he used to consult great sages and learned Brahmins who could advise him by the Shastra, of which the Śrimad-Bhagavatam is a key Shastra, who could advise him by the Shastras how to execute state administration. Such great kings were more responsible than modern elected executive heads, because, so in other words, our modern leaders, our modern politicians. So Mahārāja Parīkṣit, Srila Prabhupada is saying, was more responsible than modern elected executive heads because they obliged the great authorities by following their instructions left in the Vedic literatures. There was no need for impractical fools to enact daily a new legislative bill and to conveniently alter it again and again to serve some or other purpose. The rules and regulations were already set forth by great sages like Manu, Yajnavalkya, Parasara, and other liberated sages, and the enactments were suitable for all ages in all places. Therefore, the rules and regulations were standard and without flaw or defect. Kings like Mahārāja Parīkṣit had their council of advisors, and all the members of that council were either great sages or brahmanas of the first order. They did not accept any salary, nor had they any necessity for such salaries. The state would get the best advice without expenditure. They were themselves samadarshi, equal to everyone, both man and animal. They would not advise the king to give protection to man and instruct him to kill the poor animals. Such council members were not fools or representatives to compose a fool's paradise. They were all self-realized souls. And they knew perfectly well how all living beings in the state would be happy, both in this life and in the next life. They were not concerned with the hedonistic philosophy of eat, drink, be merry, and enjoy. They were philosophers in the real sense, and they knew well what is the mission of human life. Under all these obligations, the advisory council of the king would give correct directions, and the king or executive head, being himself a qualified devotee of the Lord, would scrutinizingly follow them for the welfare of the state. The state in the days of Mahārāja Yudhishthira and Mahārāja Parīkṣit was a welfare state in the real sense of the term, because no one was unhappy in that state, be he man or animal. Mahārāja Parīkṣit was an ideal king for a welfare state of the world. Jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So, interesting, these advisors didn't take salaries. That's one of the controversies in modern day political life, that the government have all these advisors, but they pay them very, very handsomely. In fact, if you can become an advisor to a government, you'll be doing very well materially. But also so many anomalies. I think of in past years gone by, all these inquiries they have to do because of some corruption or other going on, and they spend millions and millions on these inquiries, and it's kind of like, okay, better that they have those inquiries than not have them. But what really comes of it? Does it actually get rid of the corruption? And of course, it's really important that our leaders, and of course, Mahārāja Parīkṣit, Mahārāja Yudhishthira, these were perfect leaders, perfect personalities, completely free of any sense of personal interests, just completely selfless personalities. So we accept that maybe everybody can't be on that same level, but we should be aspiring for that level. And certainly our leaders should really, as Srila Prabhupada said many, many times, Caesar's wife must be above suspicion. And he would connect that to the leaders of society. They must be above suspicion. So they really should be striving for this. And it's when the better they are, the more perfect they are, the more expert they are in all of these areas, the better they'll be able to lead society, and the better they'll be able to satisfy the citizens. And that is one of the prime duties of a leader, that they should make the citizens peaceful and happy. That's a prime duty of a leader like that. And Krishna tells us in the Bhagavad Gita, yadi charati shestas tad tad evataro jana sa yad pramanam kurute lokas tad anuvartante. That whatever actions a great man performs, so whatever a leader does like that, common men will follow. And whatever standards they set, the leaders set by exemplary acts, all the world pursues. That's Bhagavad Gita 3:21. Now, conversely, because the last sentence there is saying whatever standards they set by exemplary acts, all the world pursues. But the flip side is also true. If the leaders are setting bad examples, the tendency will be, maybe not for everybody, but for a large portion of society, they will tend to follow that, emulate that, copy that like that. And we see that throughout history. With different leaders that we've had, and how populations have that tendency to follow and engage in similar ways and act in similar ways. So great leaders, good or bad, Unfortunately, in this age that we live in Kali Yuga, they're pretty much all bad, That's the downside. But, great leaders, good or bad, people will. That's the tendency. People will follow them. And if we focus on the fact that maybe our leaders are not so great, I often make the point, there are so many laws in society around running businesses and that kind of thing, and even people, ordinary employed people, etc. So many laws around tax laws and accountancy laws, company law, and having to fulfill all these different criteria. And boy, is there a lot of criteria involved, particularly if you're running a business like that and a company. But where does that all come from? And they're increasing, amending those laws and increasing them all the time. And really the realization came to me that the main reason for that is they don't trust themselves. And because they don't trust themselves, that naturally they project that on everybody else. Well, everyone else out there is probably dodgy and doing things they shouldn't be doing. So their way to try to solve that is just bring in all of these, reams and reams of regulations and stipulations and criteria and all that kind of thing, simply because there's no trust. But if they are trustworthy, the leaders themselves, if they're fully trustworthy, that will have a ripple effect and it will emanate out into society. And we wouldn't need all these complicated laws. And of course, recently, just a few weeks ago, there was this other thing, I think they called them the paradox papers, I think they called them, was it? Or the paradise papers or paradox papers, something. And there was these papers that were files that were found, millions of them apparently. And they were showing all the different investments that leaders around the, not just leaders actually, but anyway, they were focusing on the leaders, that leaders were making all around the world. So some of these leaders, I won't name any of them or any of the countries they're from, but they'd be running countries, some of those countries where, well, every country would have people who are in need of things and who are struggling. But some of the countries, the vast majority of the population would be in difficulty, struggling, needing better health care and all of that kind of stuff. And these leaders were like siphoning off billions of pounds or euros or dollars or whatever it was, siphoning off billions and buying themselves really exclusive and expensive real estate, etc. in different parts of the world like that. So this is the reason why we have problems in society. And we'll never really solve those problems unless we address that key problem of having leaders who are trustworthy, etc. And in that purport, Srila Prabhupada is mentioning about Yudhishthira. And Yudhishthira, of course, was, known as the ideal king. And he was also Dharmaraj. He was the personification of Dharma, or the personification of, our eternal occupation. What we always all should be doing at all times, if you like. And that, of course, inevitably is the right thing. And everything is done in connection with our with eternality, and obviously with our relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who, as many of you listening will know, has unlimited names, and one of those names is Krishna. So, and the word Krishna, just for anyone who might be listening who is not aware, the word Krishna simply means the most beautiful, all-attractive person. So whether one's a Christian, I come from a Christian background, whether one's a Hindu, whether one's a Muslim, whether one's a Jew, whatever religious tradition someone may come from, to refer to the Supreme Person, or what many people call God, to refer to them as the most beautiful or attractive person, it's like a perfect description, regardless of whatever denomination like that. So anyway, Yudhishthira, he was known as Dharmaraj, or the protector of Dharma, the personification of Dharma like that. And consequently, he was an ideal and celebrated king. But in this section that I'm reading from, even despite all of that, and essentially him being beyond reproach, he was concerned about sins that he may have incurred because of the battle that had just taken place with many people losing their lives and all of that. And he wished to purify himself of whatever karma was impacting him by sacrifice, by performing great sacrifice. And of course, in this day and age that we live in, the way that we do that is by chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, and that will free us from all sinful reaction, from all karma. Of course, the idea is, as well as chanting and freeing ourselves from all that karma, that we've accrued over many lifetimes. The idea is that we should also stop our sinful activity. It's not like a revolving door that we chant Hare Krishna for a few minutes and then on the other side we perform all sorts of nonsense activities. No, the idea is to stop those, but chant Hare Krishna like that. But there are, of course, in different ages there were different types of sacrifices. So in the context of this section that we're reading from, Mahārāja Parīkṣit wanted to perform those sacrifices, and those sacrifices were grand things, incredible yagyas they're called, and incredible what went into them. But two key components at any sacrifice, at any yagya, were brahmanas being the kind of saintly, priestly class of society, that they would chant the mantras to purify everything, etc. And the other thing were products that primarily, and those important products, came from the cow. So something like ghee. Ghee would be used to burn, to have the fire like that, liquid ghee. And ghee is clarified butter. It's basically butter with all the impurities taken out like that. But also other aspects, other things that the cow could provide. So Prabhupada, in this section, he's talking strongly, or very strongly, about that point, that in order for society to become ideal, as it was in the time of Mahārāja Yudhishthira and Mahārāja Parīkṣit, in order for society to be like that again, and it was like that up to about 5,000 years ago, is when the decay, if you like, or the deterioration set in, around a little over 5,000 years ago. So in order to bring society back to that same standard, if you like, we have to make sure of at least two things. You could say other things too, but at least to focus on these two things. We have to protect those who are essential for sacrifice. And that sacrifice, as I say, will purify society. So two key parts of society and key personalities in society are the Brahmins, as I say, who can chant the mantras, etc., and the cows, because the cows provide us with the ghee, for instance, and the other products that can be used in sacrifice. And we see in society that those two classes, I guess it's the easiest one to focus on is the cows. They are not protected at all. Not protected at all. It's described in the Shastra, or in these literatures. It's described how the cow is like one of our mothers. We have 7 mothers, 5, 6, 7. We have 7 mothers, and the cow is one of those mothers. So a society, Srila Prabhupada was once asked that question about Western civilization. What do you think of Western civilization? Of course, Gandhi once was asked the same question, and his response was, it would be a good idea. Srila Prabhupada was more specific. When he was asked that question, he said, it is not a civilized society. No society that kills its mother can consider itself to be civilized. So these are really fundamental, key, important things. We see now, just from a what would you call it, from a relative point of view, if you like, that because of the climate crisis, because of economic issues, and also health issues, actually, more and more people are coming to realize that the consumption of meat is not a good thing. Of course, they get into this thing about reducing it, and I always find that funny, you'd often hear people, I can remember teachers telling me this, maybe even their parents, I can't remember exactly, but you'd hear this kind of advice when you're younger, that, drinking alcohol, that we should drink in moderation. And I always used to think to myself, if something isn't good for you, because that's the reason they want you not to drink too much of it, because it's actually very bad for you, both in terms of the immediate way it changes your personality and you can become aggressive and violent and all of those types of things, but also from a health point of view, it's destroying particularly your liver, and there's so many diseases that come from the consumption of alcohol. But I always just remember thinking to myself, if something is so bad for you, both in terms of changing your behavior, but also having a very detrimental effect on your physical health, why drink it at all? Why take it at all? You know, if it's so bad, why take it in moderation? So the same thing with the meat consumption. It's like we should reduce our meat consumption. Just stop it. Just stop it altogether. Then from an economic point of view, because, you know, apparently, I don't know how accurate this statistic is, it's an old statistic, but to sort of bring a pig to the point where it can be slaughtered, you know, so that it can be used for meat like that, it apparently eats, let me get this right, it eats so much grain, because they feed it on grain, it eats so much grain, that grain could feed 10 times more people than the slaughtered pig feeds. So again, that goes into, by the way, an economic thing about, you know, it's wealthy society that can afford to do that, to feed something that could feed 10 times as many people, you know, so it's a luxury in that sense. So from the economic point of view, it makes no sense whatsoever. The grain that you feed a pig could feed, say, let's say 100 people, whereas the pig itself, when it's slaughtered, could only feed 10 people or something like that. You know, huge disparity between the two. So, you know, if people were to listen to what's been spoken in these literatures and listen to the incredible personalities like Srila Prabhupada, you would solve the economic problem immediately if you gave up eating meat. You would solve the health problems. They tell us that there is nothing more carcinogenic that people can eat. Carcinogenic meaning producing diseases, cancerous diseases. There is nothing that produces cancer more or leads to cancer developing more than processed red meat, basically. And actually they say that the more it's cooked, you know, like in barbecues where it's all crusty and all that black stuff, you know, that's just lethal. That's just like you're literally asking to get cancer in the long run. So health, it would solve that health problem if people just gave it up. And the climate crisis, it says that the farming industry, and particularly the the livestock, as they call it, industry, that industry is I think it's certainly in the top 3 of contributors. I think travel is a very, very big one. You know, there's different energy, producing energy is another big one. But I think that if it's not top, it's definitely in the top 3. Is that industry. So again, if we just gave it up and stopped it, and you don't need it. You know, I've been quote unquote a vegetarian for 40 years. 40 years. I guarantee my children have been vegetarian ever since the day they were born. They're in their 30s now. We don't need it. It's not needed. But yet there we go. We don't listen to the advice that's given to us, and we create all these problems from it. And it's our leaders. This is going back to Srila Prabhupada's point. It's our leaders that need to be leading the way on this. They need to be leading the way and basically, you know, telling people without force. Ultimately, we can't force. Everything's based on free will, but we have to lead by example, and by that example, it will greatly influence people to do the right thing. So that's why Srila Prabhupada came to the West from India. That's why he created the Hare Krishna movement, in essence. He created it so as that we would be leaders of society, and that we would show them the way things should be. Of course, we don't have to take any credit whatsoever in relation to that, because we're just passing on the message that Srila Prabhupada has given us. So we don't have to become proud or puffed up about it. But yes, that's by following Srila Prabhupada's instructions, we de facto become leaders in our families, in our neighborhoods, in our communities, in our society at large, like that, in the world. We become leaders if we follow Srila Prabhupada's instructions. And the world is crying out for this leadership. Right now, as Krishna also tells us in the Bhagavad Gita, this is an amazing thing. So many people in the material world. Mahārāja Parīkṣit again, he was asked, what's the most amazing thing to you in this world, material world? What is the most amazing part of this material world? And his answer was, I was going to quote a different verse. I was going to quote Hastani Sahastanam. That's the wrong verse. So I'll just speak the English words of Yudhishthira. He was asked, what's the most amazing thing in this world? And Mahārāja Yudhishthira's reply was, the most amazing thing in this world is that we have all experienced loved ones who have died, who have departed this world. And in my own personal case, as an example, one of my own siblings now at this stage has left this world, my sister, one of my sisters. Both of my parents have left this world, and all my grandparents have left this world. So I've had all that experience throughout my life of near ones and dear ones and loved ones leaving. So Mahārāja Yudhishthira's point was, every one of us in this world has had that experience of someone precious close to us leaving. Yet we all live our lives as though it is not going to happen to us. And if you think about that, it's such a profound realization. Why would we not? Why? You know, time, as we know, time is something you can't hold. Time is constantly marching on. You've all those wonderful songs, you know, from the 60s, 70s, whatever, you know. I'm not sure I should break into song. Anyway, I won't. But time is ticking on the whole time, and we can't stop it. And the march of time, what does that mean? That just means one day closer to death. Death is coming. It's coming for every single one of us. So Mahārāja Yudhishthira's point was, we know that, we've seen that happen with others, yet we just live our lives as though it's not going to happen to us. So this is the leadership that we need to give to society, that this temporary world we live in is not the be-all and end-all. Absolutely not. We need to focus on our eternal spiritual existence, and in particular our relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As long as we're fixated with this material world, and as Yudhishthira says, we pay no attention to the fact that we're going to have to die, then as Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Abramal bhuvana loka puna vato tavatino juna mam upecha tukanteya puna janmana vijate. From the highest planet, the very highest planet, all the way up to Brahmaloka, Satyaloka, the highest planet in this material world, all the way down to the very lowest planets. We're somewhere in the middle, by the way, just as a point of information, we're somewhere in the middle. But from the very highest planet, all the way down to the very lowest planet in this material world, all are places of suffering. Suffering, nothing else. Yes, you know, we might have an itch, you know, on our ear, and we scratch it, and we think, oh, that's nice, I got relief from that itch, you know, and we think that's kind of pleasure. But if you zoom out and take a helicopter view of the material universe, not just this planet, but the material universe, you can see that all are places of suffering. And Krishna explains why. Why? Because everywhere in this material universe, there is birth, death, old age, and disease. And it's constant. It's a constant cycle, a samsara, constant cycle. Birth, death, old age, and disease. So, you may be fortunate enough, if that's the right word, I don't know, to be living in Monte Carlo in a beautiful house on the cliff overlooking the beautiful Mediterranean. You may not have a care in the world in terms of money because you've got millions in the bank and all of that. The weather's beautiful, your family love you. You may have all of that. And then you may have somebody, like say for instance, refugees, you know, where's the latest refugee crisis at the minute? Is it still, I don't know, anywhere? Oh, well, Afghanistan, I guess, you know. So you may be suffering, person suffering in refuge, trying to flee a country flee it because there's, you know, you might be tortured, there's no food, or, you know, some horrible situation that someone was in. And then we make a distinction between that person and the person in Monte Carlo. And on a relative level, there are differences. Of course they are, as just described. However, both persons are born, both persons grow old, both persons have to accept disease, and both persons ultimately leave this world and die. So from the highest planet to the lowest planet, all are places of suffering because repeated birth and death are taking place. So we should also try to look. There's one beautiful description of the spiritual world, if you like, you know, Krishna's home. It's in the Brahma Samhita. I think it's in the Brahma Samhita. And it talks about, I worship that transcendental seat known as Śvēta-dvīpa, where as loving consorts of the Lakshmis, and the Lakshmis and the devotees in the spiritual world, that they're all serving Krishna. So whereas loving consorts of the Lakshmis in their unalloyed spiritual essence practice the amorous service of the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna as their only lover, where every tree has a transcendental purpose, where the soil is the purposed gem, all water is nectar, every word is a song, every gait or every step is a dance, the flute is the favorite attendant. Effulgence is full of transcendental bliss, and the supreme spiritual entities are all enjoyable and tasty, where numberless milk cows, Sarabi cows, we were talking about the cows earlier, where numberless milk cows always emit transcendental oceans of milk, where there is eternal existence of transcendental time, eternal time. So in essence, time doesn't exist actually because it's eternal. But it's nicely put there, where there is eternal existence of transcendental time, who is ever present and without past or future, and hence is not subject to the quality of passing away, as we've just been talking about, not subject to the quality of passing away, even for the space of half a moment. That realm is known as Goloka, only to a very few self-realized souls in this world. But Prabhupada came and made it available to us, and we can have access to it. Not just those very few souls that Srila Prabhupada talks about. So that's the difference. Here we are in the material world, a place of suffering where repeated birth and death take place. We should now make a goal. We want to start making our way out of the material world and just an onward march back to Goloka Vrindavan, where we'll be truly happy. And while we make that goal and make that attempt to achieve that, we should bring as many people like the Pied Piper of Hamelin, who played his flute and all the children followed him. We should be like Pied Pipers, and we should play. We can get a flute just like Krishna. We can play our flute, and we can bring as many people on this journey with us and bring them back to Godhead with us. And that's real leadership, true leadership. Okay, thank you all very much. I'll stop there. But it was a pleasure and an honor to be able to speak to all of you, and I hope it was of some use or some value. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.